may have heard of the terrain theory. It is in stark opposition to the germ theory of disease. Many people, when they hear of the terrain theory, even actually most people at this stage, it seems, have misconceived the actual theory. Even the majority of people saying that they are subscribing to the terrain theory now, even these people seem to be misconceiving what the terrain theory actually is, why it's called the terrain theory. When Louis Pasteur convinced the greater part of the culture that the germ theory is the most accurate theory humanity has come up with of disease, there was another scientist, French scientist, called Antoine Béchamp, and he was on the precipice of the findings that Louis allegedly found. They found them at the same time, but I believe if you go through the file drawer, you'll see that Antoine made the most cutting findings before Louis did. Louis publicised them and turned it into a public affair, brought the whole public mind into it and said, look, these are microbes, these are disease specific. Fermentation does not ensue without microbial activity. Disease doesn't ensue without microbial activity. These are all quite well established as fact. And also at this time, it was seemingly a fact that vaccines save lives, and well, how else would they do that if the germ theory of disease wasn't true? We already believed in the germ theory before Louis Pasteur, because we just didn't call them germs. We believed in the theory of contagion, that you can get a particle in your body and it will mass replicate, or it will take over your body, all because of that particle. The primary reason was that particle is in your body and it was mass replicating. So Antoine was saying, no, it is the terrain, not the germ. And as to the primary initiating factor of whether disease ensues or not, or even fermentation. And then everyone at this stage, because it didn't take off as a popular story, of course, the market dynamics seemed much more fitting for the germ theory of disease to be cemented in as the culture's idea, especially when the culture's already vaccinated itself, probably 80%, the Western world. So when germ theory was happening, Antoine was saying, no, that's not how it works. Yes, the microbe is associated with the disease unequivocally. It is necessary for the disease. It's not sufficient. The terrain is the thing that makes the microbe sufficient to actually play a role in the disease. The terrain is the initiating factor of disease, not the germ. And now in 2014, since the Human Microbiome Project is complete, we now know that these dangerous microbes are all through our body. And if you believe in self-replicating viruses, there's no reason to think that you don't have a measles virus or any dangerous virus in you right now that's just waiting for your immune system to go and shut down for whatever reason. It seems that people think that the immune system is not related to the health of the cells, and that when the immune system shuts down, it's some mystical force, for some reason shuts down, not having anything to do with the state, the health of the actual cells. terrain theory, what Antoine was saying is that the microbe will not proliferate unless the terrain is fitting. He wasn't saying that the human will only get sick if it's in the wrong terrain. That is not true. It is not entirely false, but it's not entirely true. And people are saying that that's actually the big theory. It's all about the terrain. You know, if you're in a bad terrain, you're going to get sick. Cut this out. The only reason this is flying is because it's not official in the universities as our best guess. If it was, we would have stamped out this misconception that's taken off and taken the front stage, the center stage of the descent. Oh, look at these people, they think it's the terrain theory. They think, oh yeah, I understand that. Yeah, when the human's in a bad terrain, it gets sick. Yeah, I understand that, but it's a bit more complex. Well, the actual terrain theory is a bit more complex than that. The cell itself, look at me, I'm a cellular structure. When these cells change, the terrain changes. Why would the cells change? Well, they have organs. They're complex structures. They're mortal, all of them. No single cell on its own is immortal. They all have a best before date or an energy expiration or whatever. It's not all about the environment you're in as to whether you get sick or not. Sometimes, perhaps some disease processes can be afforded, whereas other people can't afford them, and then they have to run with some subpar cellular structures that they couldn't afford to refurbish. It's not black and white, this disease world. It's a very complex thing, obviously. And the terrain, if you go back to the seed and the terrain with the plants and the soil, that's actually where it makes sense. The seed is the microbe, the soil is the cell. And I know some microbes are cells. That's the key point of this disease theory. We have found as a fact that during the disease, microbes proliferate. Some people are saying it's all because the microbe is present, and the undercurrent, the underdog theory that didn't take off on the market for whatever reason. Maybe if it had a vaccine if it had a medical product already on the market that the whole world was using. But no, this kind of theory comes more with a philosophy of how to live, how to nurture your cells, how to nurture yourself through disease processes, and all that. So that's the terrain theory. Don't get it mixed up with the theory of disease being it's all about what terrain you're in. No, it's either the germ theory or the terrain theory. Either when the germ proliferates on the terrain, it's because of the germ. The thing that changed was the germ, its presence, or it's because the terrain actually changed. It's a very black and white thing to say. The terrain wouldn't change. We don't have tools that are that great, and I think that what we can see that cells actually begin to degenerate before they are inviting microbes to undertake them. It is a good time to acknowledge here that I can see two very significant misconceptions that the greater part of the culture, of our ideological culture, has produced. One of the misconceptions is that I spoke of, that we have the germ theory, which the majority of the culture took to, and we have the terrain theory. The majority of the culture that took to the germ theory somehow ended up misconceiving what would you call it? Is it the opposite theory? I don't know. Somehow the majority of the culture, when it went from, okay, let's take on germ theory, go this way, when it conceived of the other way that it could have gone, it misconceived it, and it was quite simple. So the terrain theory is, they think that the disease is about whether you're in the right environment slash terrain or not. No, the terrain isn't so human focused. The terrain theory here means the terrain of which the cell grows upon. That is the initiating factor. That's one major misconception that, we could talk about why that happened or how, but it's probably not worth anything unless it's really a natural personal discussion that you come into. The other major misconception that I find fitting to note here as well together is when the majority of the culture took to this vaccines save lives slash vaccines they're worth something idea, even if they're dangerous. Just the fact that we're taking on this idea that they're worth something. It, for some reason, misconceived the crux of the debate, the crux of the position of those who don't agree. The minority who don't think vaccines save lives, who were not convinced and are not convinced. The majority of the culture, for some reason, misconceives what the crux of the issue is on the other side of the debate. They think that, the people who don't believe in vaccines saving lives, they believe that the pharmaceutical company's lying. And how strange is that? It's like, there's a salesman there, he runs an experiment. Some people say, look, that experiment doesn't do it for me because of this, that, and that. I don't think you're lying. In fact, I think you're quite noble, admirable. There's some word there that's a quality that you are evincing. For you to stand here and show me this experiment where you won't tell me what you gave the placebo recipients, and you won't show me anything more than the targeted diagnosis that you're trying to mitigate and purporting to have mitigated. This is all you're showing me. I'm not buying that. Why? Because I haven't seen a clear-cut case of the vaccinated group being better off in disease than the unvaccinated group. In fact, the unvaccinated group, they're probably vaccinated with a different vaccine, and it's all a mystery because you think that it doesn't matter if they got another vaccine because it's all so black and white. If they didn't die on the day they got their vaccine, it's all normal from there. Like, I had this interview with these aliens, and they say, well, you got vaccinated, you didn't get hurt, did you? So can't you see? And all these farmers vaccinate their cows. They would notice if they lost money when they started vaccinating or if they started gaining more. Yeah. How would I know? If I say that I have no permanent impairment noticed from vaccines, how would I know if I actually do or not? You know what I mean? How would I know unless, did I have 5 headaches that year because of the vaccine? Should I only have had 2? Did I get sick 3 times instead of none? Was I a bit slower on the running race? Was I a bit slower on the test, the intellectual exams? Am I a bit slower now? I don't think so. But if we did an experiment over 20,000 people, was as well controlled as we could make it, I think it'd be one way or the other. And it's not worth going down the road and saying, hey, Bill, you got vaccinated. How did it go? Good? Yeah. Oh, well, that must be all good. Oh, Joe, you vaccinated your cows. You doing all right? Yeah. Just a little, like I could have told these aliens that my parents have a herd of unvaccinated cows, but it wasn't really relevant. It's not really a relevant point. That there's anecdotes on both sides of the debate. Here we are talking about what controlled experiment we have actually produced that bolsters our opinion, and it seems like all the controlled experiments I can find bolster my opinion. And then these people say you need to go run more experiments. Well, no, it probably would be good to have some better experiments, and I've suggested that, and perhaps they are being underway right now. But there's some good experiments out there right now, and the fact is none of them show a lowering of mortality or disease incidence for vaccination. And the fact that that makes me a non-believer, that I'll stand back until they achieve that. People say, well, you think that they're lying. How strange. Here I am, I don't want the product because I'm not convinced. You want the product because you're convinced. And you've just told yourself that I think that they're lying. That what you can see on the results of how they know it's a good vaccination, that I've looked at that and I've decided they're lying. You you don't know, and the whole culture's taken this step down the wrong path. That no, I don't think you're being lied to. I simply am not convinced from the same set of evidence that you are, and we can talk about that if you want. The most bold line is that I'm not crossing and that you are, is that they haven't lowered mortality in controlled experiment. I'm not believing that they save lives. You do. Why? Because of the overwhelming belief. That seems to be the strongest evidence, or is it because there's a model there? Like, whatever you resort to from here, from the fact of not having a controlled experiment that shows a lower mortality for your mortality lowering product, whatever you resort to is not worth anything more than Farmer Joe and he's vaccinated his cows and now he's doing better. I know you might have a model there that says, look, these antibodies are produced. They're quite, when we vaccinate a human, they're quite similar to these humans that have this disease. Look, we can lower a targeted disease in some vaccine trials. I don't know what the strike rate of that is. I don't know if it's the aluminium in the vaccines. We don't know what actually changes the PCR results, but apparently the inventor of it said this shouldn't be used to diagnose infectious disease. So that's where we're at. I just wanted to point out, tail this video with these two main points, that have been mistaken. The two key points: terrain theory instead of germ theory. That's a major deal. The whole culture has mistaken this for, they think that it's the terrain the human lives in, whether it develops disease or not. No, Antoine was saying it is the terrain that decides whether the microbe will proliferate. Okay, I think we've got that one down pat. And then the other mistake was, these people think that the pharmaceutical company is lying. No, no one is saying. Only the people who don't really know, who haven't gone into the debate. Only people who jump on from the outside and say, I like this side, I'm gonna support them. They walk around saying the pharmaceutical company lies, they're suspicious. No, the people who actually have had the strongest foothold in the debate, the originators, the original infidels, they are saying, I have tried my hardest. It does seem no one's lying here. You're just all deluded. Okay? That's it. And for some reason the culture goes, oh no, you think we're lying. You think they're lying to us. What is it? Is it that hard for you to say, either one of us is dumber than the other? No, you just think it's a lie. Anyway, whatever.